This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 264.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. So, when they tell you have kids, they don't tell you that when you have kids, you're going to be sick almost all the time, which is what I am right now. And that's when I'm recording this intro and outro. It's a tough day. Anyways, that doesn't take away anything from our guest today, Justin Ferber, who is a recruiter, and he specializes in go-to-market teams at startups. I figured it'll be a great conversation. I wanted to see what he's seeing in terms of what's going on in the startup world, in terms of funding, in terms of how that affects the sales teams, who should apply for SE roles at startups, who do they hire first? A lot of questions that I asked Justin, and he will discuss that in the episode. So let's just jump into the show. How are you doing, Justin?
Hey, doing good, Ramsey. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm happy to have you on the call. It's been a while since I've had someone in your position on the call, so I'd love to hear your perspective on many things. And I'm kind of teasing about your position, so might as well start it off with you introducing yourself, who you are, and what is your position.
Yeah, of course. My name is Justin Ferber, and I am a recruiter. My focus within recruitment is on building go-to-market teams for high-growth technology companies. So the company that I work with, the Search Experience, is especially focused on earlier stage companies. So a lot of companies that are anywhere from seed to Series C in those early growth phases, and our focus is on helping them to build out their foundational sales and marketing teams.
All right, so I wanted to ask a lot more questions about you, but you're already throwing out things that I'm gonna talk about. So I'm just taking notes. All right. Good.
And we're here in San Francisco, by the way. You wouldn't know it from the photo behind me on our wall here.
Yes,
that's Sydney. One of the founders of our business is from Sydney originally.
So are you forced to have a Sydney picture behind you, or is that just you make it?
Yeah, it was mandatory.
part of HR rules.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious, how does one become a recruiter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's not one of those professions that you plan to get into. Most of the people that I know in recruitment didn't know what they wanted to do and just kind of fell into it. That is the same for me, I would say. I never woke up one morning and said I wanted to be a recruiter, but I found my way. I guess the backstory is that I studied international relations, nothing to do with recruitment. And I started my career in government on the East Coast, but ended up migrating back to the Bay Area, where I'm from originally, and migrated my way into technology because that's what you do in the Bay Area, right? And so my career in tech started at a company called Caviar, this on-demand food delivery service, and that ended up getting acquired by DoorDash. It was part of Square while I was there. So I kind of got familiar with the industry there. I was working in operations, but I'm a competitive kind of person. I grew up playing sports, yada, yada. I felt unchallenged in operations and wanted to get onto the revenue side of the business. So I was already thinking about getting into sales, and I'd actually accepted an SDR position at a tech company. And then I by chance, I had a recruitment agency reach out to me on LinkedIn and ended up bringing me in and taking a chance on me. And I guess that was like 6 years ago, and here I am.
Okay. It's funny to say that a company that delivers food is a tech company, but it is in fact a tech company. So like Uber is a tech company. It's not a car driving company.
Right. It's the technology that connects the couriers with diners and the restaurants, the back end technology. Exactly.
And now you've been a recruiter for a while. When someone asks you, like, what do you do? Like, how do you explain what a recruiter does?
Yeah, it's, sometimes you don't think about what you do every day. You just do it, right? That's a good question. Recruitment is, I mean, it's kind of like sales in a lot of ways. It's because I do 360 recruitment. So I'm responsible for bringing in all of my own clients and then running end-to-end candidate searches for them. So, I mean, I explain it as, I guess, a category of sales. And it's really about, I think recruiting is about building relationships, both with your clients and with your candidates, aligning expectations. There's a lot of it as well. I mean, gosh, there's so many different things that go into recruitment. I guess I could go on, but I don't want to bore your audience.
Just so I understand it properly, I'm going to rephrase what you said. Hopefully I understood. Yeah. What you do is you go find the companies that are looking to recruit people. You get them on board. I guess you sell them on your services, and then you go find them people to join the company.
Correct.
Does that summarize it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So as a quote unquote, new business for me consists of going out and finding technology companies that are looking to grow their sales and marketing teams. I guess like the sweet spot for what that would look like for someone like myself is a technology company that's recently gotten some sort of VC funding and is looking to apply that money to, has certain growth metrics that they're looking to hit, where these foundational sales and marketing teams that they build are going to be key to achieving those objectives, especially revenue. So yeah, and the kind of sales that I do in recruitment is mostly networking. So a lot of my business comes through word of mouth, through clients that I've worked with in the past, but also through candidates that I meet, as well as through the VC network of VCs and angel investors that I've gotten connected to over the years.
Yeah. So if I ask you any questions that are proprietary or not you're willing to share, please let me know. But I'm going to ask and see what happens.
Sure.
What stops a company from saying yes to working with you? My understanding, again, feel free to correct me or not, is that they don't pay for that until you get someone hired. Is that accurate?
There are different models of recruitment. There are recruitment agencies that are contingent, i.e. the fee comes after placement, so there's no upfront commitment. So I am in retained recruitment where essentially a part of our fee is taken up front so that both sides are committed. So I'd say that, as far as barriers to working with clients, sometimes it comes down to budget. Sometimes it's, sometimes companies already have a recruitment team internally, et cetera.
Yeah.
Number of different things.
Like I would say you act kind of as a third party internal recruiting. Like they're outsourcing the recruiting to you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And the way that we work here at the Search Experience, we're very hands-on, consultative. We essentially act as an extension of the teams that we're supporting.
Okay.
So about as close as you can get to having an internal recruiter, where we're on Slack with our clients. We're speaking with founders and CEOs that we're working with every day. It's a very hands-on, close relationship that we have.
Okay. All right. So a couple of terms you mentioned earlier that I want to clarify for the folks listening. One, you said go to market. I think you already answered that question, but let's just be clear. Go to market equals what?
Yeah, good question. It's anything that touches sales and marketing for us. So we're building out CMO and CRO lines of business. So sales and marketing leaders all the way down to sales and marketing individual contributors. And then as it relates to your audience, we do everything from pre to post sales. So a lot of, very commonly working on sales or solutions engineering positions, customer success, the full gamut.
Okay. And this is one thing that I see. I'll see a lot of companies that have salespeople that have customer success, and then they think about hiring an SE. What have you seen throughout your career with certain companies where they're trying to build the sales team? Is it salesperson and then everybody else, or is there a specific process of who they hire first, then second, then third?
Yeah, typically we'll see a company bring on at Series A, for example, we'll typically see a company invest at that stage in bringing on a VP of sales and a couple of account executives, and then they'll bring on a sales engineer to support their first account executive. So the sales engineer is usually, it's one of the first hires, and it typically comes after a VP of sales and account executive.
I'm glad to hear that, because what I hear is completely different. Like, a lot of people hire, they have 10 salespeople, and remember that they have to hire an SE, or sometimes they don't. They just hire a customer success person, and then they hire an SE later, and they have to prove the value of sales engineering. So I'm glad it's different.
I mean, two specific examples, I'll leave the clients' names out, but two companies that I've worked with very recently, Series A and Series B, had, I think, 2 to 3 account executives on their team each before they opted to bring in a sales engineer when they figured out that
that's good.
It was too much. They really needed that technical resource on calls, and it was just more than the VP of sales could handle. So I often see it as one of the first hires on the go-to-market team.
I'm glad to hear that. In terms of funding, this is a question I can probably Google, but since you're here, when you say Series A, Series B, Series C, is there like a number? Like Series A, you get, I don't know, $5K, or Series B, you get $1 million. Is there a number that are attached, or is just the first and the second and the third funding?
It's changed a lot over the past couple of years. The whole startup ecosystem has changed a lot since, let's say, 2021, when there was this huge boom of startups that were getting funding. I guess I won't go into that long story. I'll keep it shorter.
You could if you want. I'm sure someone will find it interesting, including myself.
Sure. Well, I guess, going back to 2021, right? There was this huge boom in SaaS happening. There was a lot of companies getting funding, and I think probably some of them shouldn't have.
Yeah.
We were in this environment where interest rates were low, investors were looking for where they could get a high return, a lot of money funneled into startups, and let's say, I guess to put it nicely, there was probably less discretion that went into funding some of these startups. And now the tables have turned, interest rates are high, valuations of startups in general have come down, and there's a lot more scrutiny happening within the venture capital space. So it's more difficult now than it was a year and a half ago to get funding. So that's a long-winded way of me getting to the point, which is that like funding rounds can vary, but I'd say they've come down a little bit over the past year and a half. I'd say typically, like for Series A, somewhere in the ballpark of 15 million plus or minus is what you could expect in this market. That's, give or take. Series B, Series B's are down significantly, and I actually don't know what a good benchmark would be currently, just because I haven't seen a lot of them happening recently. More than a Series A, but I don't want to throw out a number.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So there isn't an exact number. It's just from what I understood when I talked to like a few CEOs of new companies, like, we have to hit these milestones to get the next one, which we don't know how much it will be. But generally speaking, it's dependent on doing something you promised you're going to do, like whether it's landing the first big whale customer or 5 small ones, whatever it is.
Yeah, at Series A, for example, oftentimes companies are looking to increase their revenue by 2 to 3x, and that a lot of that money will be dedicated to building the team that's going to help them to drive that increase.
Right.
And typically, as you go to Series B, D, C, D, the amount of funding that companies will get will be incrementally larger.
Right. Okay. And speaking of like things changing from 2021, I found that like in 2021, you couldn't find an SE even if you begged. And now there's a lot more. What are you seeing in the market? Like, is it easier to find SEs to hire for those positions that you're looking for your current clients, or is it still as hard as 2021? What are you seeing the market going for SEs?
Yeah, I think in 2021, it was difficult to pry a good SE away from a company because the market was just so tight. Every company was hiring. It was a candidates market, and I'd say it's flipped. There's still there's still a lot of demand in market for SEs from what we're seeing. We're running a search currently. I recently placed an SE with another client of mine earlier this year. So there's definitely demand. I'd say the demand is reflective of maybe from a macro perspective, it's less than in 2021. But the trend that we're seeing in our space, VC-backed startups, is that VCs are funneling their money into earlier stage startups, so seed, Series A kind of companies, and those are the companies that are doing the most hiring. Whereas, we're seeing a lot of later stage companies that are struggling to grow into their evaluations, making 15 to 30% cuts. There's no secret that there have been a lot of layoffs in tech recently. But I guess, if I were an SE, I would feel pretty good about my specialty because I think there's a bit of supply and demand, right? It's a niche, unique skill set to have that blend of technical and sales acumen.
Yep.
And we always see ups and downs in the market, but I think, from a long-term career perspective, it's a great place to be, and that there will always be demand for that particular blend of skills.
Okay. Are you still seeing the supply as being low? The reason I'm asking, as you were talking, I just pulled up LinkedIn and found the first SE job in Canada, and it's remote. It posted 2 days ago, and there's 82 applicants.
Yeah.
Are you seeing similar trends where it used to be last year, there are 0 applicants and you're going to have to go find one?
Right.
Now it's everybody's applying, especially for remote roles. For on location roles, there's 1 applicant per job. So what are you seeing in that aspect?
Yeah, I think, again, from a macro perspective, there are less jobs than there were a year and a half ago. What I'm seeing, though, is that it's still difficult for companies to hire for very specific skill sets. And typically our clients, when they come to us, they're looking for, someone who comes from a pretty specific kind of background, has, in-depth industry experience and a number of other details that, to where this person is probably not going to be likely to apply.
Okay. So there might be a lot of people applying. It's just they don't have whatever the company is looking for in terms of skills.
Correct.
All right. Well, I guess that brings me to my next question. What are companies looking for? If you're looking for an SE to place at a company, what do you look for in terms of skills and history, background, in order to be able to say, this is a good candidate, I should bring them in front of the hiring manager, for example?
I think it's heavily dependent on the company. Again, the kind of searches that we're running here, it's often that, for example, if we're running a search for a DevOps company, they'll be looking for experience coming from within that space, ideally candidates that come from certain types of companies, even that really will understand their technology from the get-go and be able to have a short ramp time. That's especially important for early stage companies where things are just moving at a really fast pace. In general, I mean, typically what I see companies looking for is an engineer who can sell, right? And I think it's a unique combination of abilities. But yeah, I guess if I had to summarize it, usually companies are looking for someone who started their career as an engineer and has a really robust, would have a really robust technical understanding of their product to be able to be able to capture the value proposition for their buyers, which are oftentimes going to be technical personas as well. And then, that coupled with being able to sell an enterprise type product and convey value, right? Capture that value for their prospective buyer.
Okay. So you're not necessarily looking for someone who's already an SE. You could be looking for someone who's an engineer and may develop the ability to sell. because most engineers cannot sell if their life depended on it, in my experience.
Yeah. For what I do, right, in agency recruitment, it would be unlikely that a client would be looking for someone who's still an engineer. They'd be looking for someone who was an engineer and then has already become a sales engineer. But I think for, if in terms of your audience who may be thinking about career transitions, it's I see it as a pretty common one for engineers who are feeling, let's say, a little bored coding all day and want to be customer facing, to become sales engineers. It's a pretty common career path.
I kind of tell people who are not currently SEs not to apply to startups where they're the first SE, because you're going to have to build the systems. You're going to have to deal with the account management, how it works, the processes, and how to do a demo, a proof of concept, how to create the story behind the product. And you don't know how to do any of that, so don't apply to that company. If there's a company that has 5-6 SEs already, apply to that, but don't be the first SE. Because I've worked with SEs who come to me and I'm the first SE at the company. All right, and what do you do? It's post sales. So you're not an SE. Yeah, well, my CEO won't let me do any demos. All right, how does your CEO demo? It's all right, they show me the demo. It's the worst thing I've ever heard, but because they're the CEO, they can sell. They know the product inside out. They know the story behind it. So yeah, if you're looking to become an SE, don't apply to a startup. It's a bad idea. Go find a company.
I agree. Yeah, being the first SE at a startup isn't for the faint of heart. You want to have been there and done this before to have lessons that you can apply, right? Yeah. I agree. I think a better route to becoming an SE would be to join a more established company with a team in place where you can learn the ropes, essentially.
Yeah. But for startups, if you're an SE who's been doing this for 2, 3, 4 years, is there a minimum experience range that they look for at startups, as far as you know?
For a first SE?
Yeah, in terms of how many years have they been an SE in the past?
I don't know if it's terribly prescriptive, but for your first SE, you want someone who's been at a startup before and understands the pace and that you will be wearing multiple hats. Things change and quickly.
I hate it when you say that. Sorry. I hate it when you say that, just because if I'm currently in SE, I'm not looking to get into a startup, but let's say I am. I've never worked on a startup. The smallest company I've ever worked with is 1,500 people. And if someone's looking for someone with startup experience, how can I ever get startup experience if I'm never hired because they're looking for someone with startup experience? It's like the chicken and the egg. Same with sales engineering in general. I want an SE who has 5 to 10 years of experience. Okay, how does one get that if they're not given the chance? So I'm not blaming you or anything.
Oh yeah, no, I think the alternative would be to take on, to have spearheaded and owned projects at a larger company, or have started, have had complete ownership of a product, right, and built a team around it, or built foundational processes for a new line of business. These are, regardless of the size of the company that you're with, those are lessons that are those are lessons learned that would be easy to apply at a startup, right? So I just generally speaking, that is a common transition that I'll see for folks that have started their careers at larger companies, to where they'll just, before going straight into a startup, they will have taken on more ownership at a larger company and have built something to where the transition would be a little bit more seamless going into a startup.
Okay. All right. Good to know. There are ways, basically.
There are definitely ways.
Yeah. Okay. I tell people, when you're interviewing or you're writing your resume, always focus on the impact you've had, not on the job description that you've had. And that impact you're mentioning is very specific to startups, but could work for anybody else.
Yeah, and if you're at a larger company and looking to join a startup, seek out what needs to be done at your company and spearhead something, from from 0 to 1, right? And build something.
And in terms of the interview process, I know like I've interviewed for larger companies. It's 6, 7, 8, 10 interviews, demo, a panel interview, you have to dance, something. Like,
Right.
it's a very long interview process. What's it like at a startup?
We typically advise our clients to have no more than 4 or 5 steps in their process. I think it's, there's a balance here. You want to be able to, from the company's perspective, you want to be able to evaluate the candidate, but you don't want it to be so exhaustive that you're out of line with market standards and you're losing out on your perfect candidate because your process is too long and your ideal candidate has already gone through other processes and accepted an offer. So yeah, typically we'd like 4 to 5 steps is about right.
Like from my experience, the bar is fairly low in terms of the market standard. And I've been in interviews that took like 6 months, which
Wow.
I've done interviews, and that's something happened like that where I applied for one job, started the interview process, then started talking to another company, and now I'm doing 2 interview processes at the same time. Got the offer, and I really wanted the first company, but like they wouldn't finish the interview process, and at one point I said, "Sorry, I gotta go." Right?
Yeah, I
I have
mean,
one bird in hand.
6 months sounds kind of outrageous to me. To like, it kind of suggests at that point as a candidate, like, well, are you really interested in me, right? Why is the process taking so long?
These are larger companies that have like 20, 30,000 people minimum, and they have a standard where you have to interview with an recruiter, SE manager, 2 or 3 SEs, at least one salesperson, director of sales, do a panel interview where you do a demo, and then talk to the director or VP after that. And I've seen that fairly common between many of the, not even larger organizations. Like I've worked for a company that's 1,500 people that took similar amount, and that is the process that they follow. And this person's on vacation. We need you to talk to that guy, but he's traveling on business. That person got sick, whatever.
Yeah, there are more stakeholders.
Yeah,
I mean, I can understand how a process would take longer for a company that size, but still 6 months, that's, you're going to lose.
It might be an exaggeration on my end, but it's definitely a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rule of thumb for a company is you want to be able to evaluate a candidate to make sure they're going to be the right fit not just from a skill perspective, but also be the right fit for your team. So, you want to have enough steps to make sure you're checking those boxes, but not so many that you're losing out on the person that you want to join your company because it's taken too long.
And that gets me thinking. Hiring someone, it's a huge risk, no matter who it is, and no matter how many interviews, you'll never know this. You can get into paralysis by analysis. How does a VP of sales at a startup that is cash strapped, right? Like it's not their money that they can just spend as they wish. They might have a lot of scrutiny over everything that they do. How does one mitigate risk while hiring whoever it is? Since we talk about SEs, let's just focus on that. When hiring the first SE,
like mitigate risk in terms of
hiring the right person,
avoid hiring the wrong person.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you want to speak with enough people, first of all, right? You want to speak with enough people to where you know what an excellent candidate looks like. And I think in most cases, my clients will have a pretty good sense of what that person will look like at the outset of a process, to where I'm, as their recruiter, I'd be presenting candidates that, that look, at least on paper, to be like they would be a good overall match for the company. But I think it comes down to just, making sure that you're speaking with enough people that you can benchmark and, have a good idea of what excellent looks like.
In your experience, what does excellent look like?
I think it depends on, it's really dependent on the search that I'm running. Typically, companies will have a few different must-haves and nice-to-haves that they're looking for, but it's really kind of company dependent, I would say.
Okay. There aren't any common themes that you find between good SEs and perfect SEs and great SEs and maybe horrible SEs?
I think it goes back to that blend of sales acumen and engineering prowess, right? I think the best SEs are not necessarily the best engineers. They don't have to be the best engineers, but they know enough to be able to really engage in a meaningful way with technical buyers that they're presenting to. And then I often see that the best SEs are just killer salespeople too. They could probably be account executives if they wanted to. And so they've, a lot of the best SEs that I've seen have really invested in their sales education and become medic trained, et cetera, and really have built that discipline to become a solid sales professional as well.
Yeah, just be careful of that, because you might get thrown and become a salesperson, whether you like it or not. That's what's happened to me.
Right. I've seen that happen too.
Yeah, Ramsey, you're too good. Here you go. Become a salesperson. But that's not what I want.
Right.
All right. Well, this has been a great conversation, Justin. I want to move on to the not so fire round, which is the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. They're more about you than anything else. So let's get started. Question number 1: what do you love about being a recruiter more today?
I love learning about new technologies. I love, meeting and building relationships with new people, both candidates and clients. I love the satisfaction of being able to help someone to really take a meaningful next step in their career and find a great match for them. And also, on the flip side, have an impactful role in a company's growth and development by building the team that's going to help them to get from, A to B. So yeah, there are a lot of things that give me satisfaction in my role as a recruiter.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that. Question number 2: if you look within, that sounds philosophical. Let me change that. If you're talking to your boss, what would he say your superpower is, or she? What would they say that your superpower is?
Ooh, that's a good one. Probably just
other than your hair.
Other than my hair, yeah. And I think just a natural ability to connect with people, and I guess on the client side, build enduring relationships. So yeah, that's a good one. You got me there, but I think that's probably.
I think that's a good answer, though.
Yeah, I think if I were to ask my boss, that would probably be the first thing that would jump out.
If I were to ask you, what would you say is your superpower? Would it be different?
My superpower, man. Yeah. I guess I'm just so humble that I have a heart.
Your humility is your superpower. There you go.
No, I think I would probably agree with that. Just kind of a natural ability to connect with people in the business world and
I can
build
attest to that.
relationships. Yeah.
This is the second time we meet, and I can see that you even went out of your way to help me in something that's unrelated to you. So
I like to think of myself as a genuine person. And I mean, part of what I do professionally is connecting companies and candidates, but even outside of that, like, how we've worked together outside of the podcast, I like to be able to leverage my network to make relevant introductions for both candidates and clients that I work with that will be fruitful for them professionally. So I've done, I guess part of the benefit of being a recruiter is that I'm speaking with candidates, companies, investors every day. And so I meet a lot of people. And so it's nice to be able to just kind of like randomly be speaking with a candidate. They'll tell me something about what they're looking for, and then something will click, and I'll say, oh, you know what? I have someone in my network that you should speak with. Let me connect you with them. So
you're a super connector.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess I could have said that a lot more succinctly.
Well, I just thought of it, so
Yeah.
I didn't
Super
think about it
connected.
either until you said that. You can connect people.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're super connected. All right, cool. Last question of the not so fire round: is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
A habit that I work on to improve
Yep.
my professional life.
Or personal, whichever one. Putting the baby to sleep could be one.
Yeah, I think being disciplined with my schedule, going to bed at a reasonable hour if possible, waking up early to be able to start my day early and be productive and be consistent with that. So
Okay.
just like being really regimented about managing my schedule and then being very regimented about exercising is also really key. I find that I just feel when I feel better physically, I also do better professionally because I'm just all around healthy. It's amazing how those two things are related and you don't even realize it until until you've been out of the gym for a while. So yeah, just staying really consistent at the gym and getting outdoors. I work mostly remotely, so finding time for hikes and being outside, I think just pays dividends
Yep.
for me professionally. It just keeps me in a good headspace.
Nice.
And then I think recently also I've been more disciplined about coming to the office once or twice a week. And so just having that regular contact with colleagues live in the flesh has also been, I think, a really positive thing for me personally.
So you fly to Australia every twice a week.
Yeah.
In case anyone's wondering, if you're
It's only
listening
once a week.
Yeah.
It's only once a week, though.
Only
Yeah.
once a week we fly to Australia.
Yeah.
If anyone just listening to the podcast, Justin has a picture of the Sydney Opera House behind. Is that the Sydney Opera House?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's right.
we should have mentioned that at the start. Hopefully now you get the joke. All right. So Justin, we're at the end of our show. Was there a question you were hoping I was going to ask you, which I did not?
I don't think so, man. I think we covered a good amount of territory here.
Good. All right. So final question of the day, at least for me. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
I am on LinkedIn, so that's one way. It's probably the best way, honestly. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, so I'd say to feel free to connect with me there as a starting point.
As if you're a recruiter. All right, cool, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me on. It's been fun. Appreciate you as well.
All right, SE Nation, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Justin Ferber. A lot of takeaways for me. Like, things are much harder right now in terms of funding. So sales engineering roles at startups are not as easy to find as they may have once been. Again, if you're a brand new SE or you're trying to break into sales engineering, being the first SE on a team is not a great idea. You should definitely not do that. But, you can always try it and see how it goes. I'm never someone to tell others what not to do. Like, you can try whatever you want and see if it works out for you. And it's always experience. Whether good or bad, it's always experience. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Justin, for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for listening. And I will see you next time. With that, I'm signing off.